Okay, for our next step, we're going to start to add dimensions to our drawing. So remember, we already have all that information on the version that I have here. So I'm going to actually make sure I can see that while I'm working. And I'm going to transfer those numbers onto here. But I'm going to write the real number. I'm not doing the math anymore. So I'm going to make sure that I draw the accurate number. So when you're actually drawing those dimensions, you still use a ruler and you still have a system to follow. So what you do, the first dimension I'm going to draw is actually from here to here. So I'm going to put my ruler on the edge. I'm going to line up with a line. And I'm going to start about 1/16 away from the edge. And make a little dot. And then I'm going to make a, in this case, 3/16 inch long line. Just like that. I'm going to go over to the other side, do the same thing, 1/16 away, 3/16 line, just like that. So I am going to be putting a line between there and drawing my measurement. So to do that, I'm actually going to measure up from my line about 1/8 of an inch on each one. The reason we do this is because it looks really consistent. So I just made two tiny little T's, and then I'm going to connect those lines together. Okay, so that line right there is a line that we'll be able to draw a dimension on. Now I know that it's 5.5. Now what I like to do is I actually like to draw the dimension in the line versus on top of the line. We're not drawing this for a company or anything, so I'm totally fine with doing it that way. So I'm actually going to erase a little section in the middle, as centered as you can just by eye, just like that. And that's where you're going to write your dimensions. We're not going to draw it as big as we drew our other letters. We're going to go smaller. So I'm just going to be careful to draw in a straight line and put my 5.5 inches in there. So I just wrote 5.5 inches, that's it. So maybe you can see that, 5.5 inches up there. That's what we're doing. Now I'm going to do the same for the side. So remember, I'm going to mark over 1/16, make my line 3/16 long, and I'm going to mark at 1/8 of an inch. 1/16, 3/16, and 1/8. And then I can connect those little 1/8 lines again. This one, I know, is 4 inches. And try and be as obvious as possible. Remember, 2 ticks is inches, 1 tick is a foot. So make sure you're using the right one. So we have a 5.5 and a 4. Now we only need to put dimensions if they're beneficial. If you can't get them any other way, that's when we add them. So we know this is 4, we know this is 5.5, but we do need some other information. We don't need to measure where this hidden leg is because on our side view we'll be able to show the distance from here to here. On the top view it's not something we worry about. But we do need to know the size of these and the spacing in between. So let's mark those. So what I'm going to do is from each and every one of those, I'm going to make a little line down. So from 1/16 away, 1, 2, 3/16, and mark at the 1/8 mark. And now we know what those sizes are already. So because I am going to be drawing my measurements in here, I'm going to erase the centers of the ones that are going to fit a number. Okay, so I know this is 1 inch, and this one's 1 inch. This one is 1 3/4. Okay, and now I need to do those other ones. So I have 3/8 and 1/2 inch. Those are fairly large. They do fit if I'm very careful. So I'm going to be very careful to erase just little sections in those gaps and try and get that in there. So the sides are 3/8. So it's not so much that they're small, it's just they have to be legible. You have to be able to read them when you're done. And of course this is always easier if you can do it on a computer with drafting software, but that's a little more advanced than what we're working with here. So there's my measurements showing how far apart the dovetails are, and I'm missing one more measurement that I need to add to show how far those go. Okay, so notice how my line doesn't go onto the surface. We know we're referencing that distance by our dotted line and where it goes to. So now we have the dimensions of the top, where all of the dovetails go, and how far back they go. That should be everything we need from this top view for dimensions. Okay, so to dimension the front, we're going to go the same route and we're going to do the same dimensions. Technically we don't actually need this dimension. We're still going to add it, but we know that dimension from the top, and we know with an orthographic drawing that the lines transfer down. But just to be safe, we're going to make sure whoever reads this plan actually has the information. So it's not necessary to have it, but this is one dimension that I would still include just because it would help people read your drawing. So remember to draw that little 1/8 inch marker for where you're going to put your line. Erase the center. 5.5. Okay, we're still going to include the height again, but we don't need to do that as well, but we're going to do it. Actually, sorry, we do need to include the height on this one because we don't have it yet. The height is 3.5. We measured the depth of the front. So there's our 3.5. So we have 3.5 and 5.5. There's our dimensions of the basic front appearance. Now we need to start marking the dovetail information, which is going to be different. We're not going to mark these dimensions this time. We're going to mark these dimensions, which is a bit different the way we're going to do that. But first I'm going to draw how high those are. So I'm going to just mark off the edge, 1/2 inch. Okay, now we need these dimensions in here. Properly, you normally don't draw on your image a lot. You would draw outside of your image. In our case, for this, we're going to draw inside because there's lots of room. So I'm actually going to draw from each of those points down, just like we did at the top. I'm just going to mark those same kind of lines, 1/16 away, 3/16 down, mark at the 1/8. And then I'm going to go and get rid of each part in the middle for my measurement. So I know that this is 1/2 inch. This is 7/8 of an inch. This is 5/8 of an inch. This is 1 1/2 inch. 5/8 of an inch. 7/8 of an inch. And 1/2 of an inch. So now those are all dimensioned left to right and how high they go. Okay, so that gives us our information. That should be everything we need to know on this view. Alright, the last part we need to dimension is our right side view. So we need to know a few dimensions, but some of them we don't need anymore. So technically we don't need this length. We technically don't need that thickness. We don't need this height. But we do need everything else. Now, I'm going to actually leave out some of those dimensions this time because I feel like we've kind of done them enough. So first thing I need to know is the thickness of these pieces, which we don't have yet. So I'm going to measure those, and I know that they're 1/2 inch thick. So I'm going to draw my little marks. And mark them at 1/2 inch. And they're both the same. Okay, so those are marked. Now my next part is how far apart are these? So I can actually use these same measurements here and use them as my guide. Erase that. And I'm going to look at my object. So 2 1/4 inches. So now I know the distance from here all the way to here because I just add this, this, and this together. That gives me the full measurement. So that's 1/2 plus 1/2 is 1 inch. So that's 1 plus 2 1/4 is 3 1/4 from here to here. Which, if we needed to know, we could get it from our drawing without having to actually write that that's 3 1/4. The next step, we need some measurements for this dovetail. And to get that, this is very hard to draw on here, but basically we would need the measurement from the side to the bottom of that dovetail and to the top of that dovetail. So I'm actually going to reference the dovetail off of the drawing by coming over here, 1, 2, 3/16, mark at the 1/8, and come down here and reference 1, 2, 3/16, mark at the 1/8, just like this. And I'm going to write beside my line because it's not enough space, and that is 1/4 inch. Now that is referencing the height of that dovetail. Now, technically, we could be going through to that object. So if you see, that line is now referencing there. This line is still referencing here, giving you the height of your dovetail. And that's fine. This is what we're going to do. I don't believe that's actually the proper way to go onto your drawing past to reference a point, but it's fine for what we need. And then we can do the same thing here where we would reference from the edge of our object here. So I'm actually going to do that same thing again. Just like that. And then I'm going to reference down here, which is the bottom of that dovetail. Okay, so it's not perfect, but it is what we're trying to see. So that distance right there that I've marked is 1/16 inch. Okay, so from the bottom of that dovetail to the inside of that dovetail is 1/16. It's 1/4 inch high, and it's the same on the other side, so we're only going to mark one side. So we can get the height from our other drawings, we can get the total depth from our other drawings, we can get the thickness of the top from our other drawings, we can get the placement of all of the other dovetails from the other drawings. I think now we've incorporated everything we need for our drawing for dimensions. So that is it for dimension. So as a whole, your drawing should now look like this.